Hey everyone, welcome to another deep dive. When I first saw the title of this book, The Lost Wisdom of the Pharaohs, I was immediately hooked. Lost Wisdom from the Pharaohs. It just screams mystery and intrigue.
Yeah, it definitely grabs your attention. And it's not just any wisdom we're talking about here. It's the teachings of Hermes Trismegistus.
Okay, so Hermes Trismegistus. Who is this guy?
Well, he's a bit of an enigma, a legendary figure considered the source of all knowledge in ancient Egypt. And the book even mentions that the Greeks associated him with their god Thoth. That's how influential he was.
Wow, so we're dealing with a pretty major figure here. A sage revered across cultures. So what exactly is this lost wisdom that Hermes supposedly left behind?
Well, the teachings attributed to Hermes are known as the Hermetica, and they cover a vast range of topics: cosmology, alchemy, spirituality, you name it. It's like a blueprint for understanding the universe and our place in it.
And this wisdom was hidden intentionally,
Right.
almost like a prophecy for future generations.
Exactly. The book talks about how Hermes predicted future generations would turn away from their religion and stop believing. He even describes carving his wisdom onto stone tablets, knowing that one day people would rediscover it.
Wow, that's pretty mind-blowing,
hmm
especially when you think about how much skepticism there is towards traditional beliefs these days. It's like he saw it coming.
It's definitely thought-provoking. Some might interpret it as a decline in traditional beliefs, while others might see it as a shift towards a more individualistic approach to spirituality.
So how do we make sense of this lost wisdom? What makes it relevant to us today, thousands of years later?
Well, the Hermetica offers timeless insights into the nature of God creation and our place in the universe. Even though it was written in ancient Egypt, its principles still resonate with people today who are searching for meaning and purpose.
Okay, so let's dive into some of those principles. The book starts by talking about the nature of God, referring to the supreme being as Adam. And it uses this interesting analogy. It describes the supreme mind as being like the number one. You can divide it and multiply it, but it always remains one. What's that all about?
It's a brilliant way to illustrate the concept of God being both immanent and transcendent.
And
Immanent meaning present within everything, and transcendent meaning beyond everything.
okay, I'm trying to wrap my head around this. How does the number one analogy work exactly?
Think of it like this. The number one can be divided into fractions, right? But no matter how many times you divide it, it's still ultimately one whole. In the same way God is present in every single thing in the universe, yet God also transcends all of creation.
I see. So it's like each individual thing is a reflection of the divine, but the divine itself is much greater than the sum of its parts.
Exactly. And the book emphasizes that creation isn't a one-time event. It's an ongoing process. Adam is constantly creating, always in motion. So if God is constantly creating, does that mean we can see God's handiwork everywhere we look? Like, is the physical world a reflection of the divine?
That's exactly what Hermes suggests. He encourages us to contemplate the physical world as a way to understand the spiritual world. He uses the image of the starry night sky, for example. Instead of just seeing random points of light, he encourages us to see the perfection of God's creation.
So even in the seemingly mundane, we can find traces of the divine. Like when I see a beautiful sunset or a delicate flower, I should be seeing the divine expressing itself through those things.
Precisely. And what's even more fascinating is that the Hermetica doesn't just stop at observing creation, it takes it a step further.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What happens when we start to see the world in that way? What's the next level?
Well, according to Hermes, when we truly grasp this concept of God being present within everything, a shift occurs within us.
What kind of shift?
We become, in his words, passive instruments of God's will. Now, I know that phrase might sound a little strange at first. Yeah, it does sound a little counterintuitive. Wouldn't being an instrument of God's will require us to be active, to do things, to make choices?
That's a natural question and one that we'll delve into a bit later, but for now, just hold on to that thought. Let it simmer in your mind as we move into the next section of our deep dive, which focuses on the transformation of Hermes himself.
Okay, I'm definitely hooked. Tell me more about this transformation. What happened to Hermes?
Well, the book describes a moment where Hermes declares he no longer sees the world with his physical eyes. He's gone beyond the limitations of the material world and is now perceiving reality through a different lens, the lens of the eternal mind.
Whoa, that's some next level stuff. It almost sounds like he's talking about achieving a state of enlightenment.
It's definitely a profound shift in perception, and it's a shift that Hermes suggests is possible for all of us.
Okay, now you're really talking my language.
Yeah.
I'm all about exploring those possibilities. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's back up a bit. What exactly does it mean to see the world through the lens of the eternal mind? What does that even look like?
That's the heart of what we'll be exploring in the next part of this deep dive, and it's where things start to get really interesting. Stay tuned, because we're just getting started.
Welcome back to our deep dive. I'm really curious to hear your thoughts about that last part.
Oh man, where do I even begin? It's a lot to process. This whole idea of seeing the world through the lens of the eternal mind. It's so intriguing. But I'm having trouble picturing it. What does that actually look like?
Well, the book offers some clues through the analogy of a craftsman. Imagine a skilled artisan creating a masterpiece. Each detail, each brushstroke, each curve, carefully planned and executed. The final product, it's a reflection of the creator's mind and will.
I see. So just like an artist puts their essence into their work, God's essence is reflected in every aspect of creation.
Exactly. The physical world isn't just a random collection of objects. It's a manifestation of the divine mind. Everything, from the smallest grain of sand to the vastness of the cosmos, it bears the imprint of the creator.
Wow, that's powerful. So we're all interconnected then.
Right.
Part of this grand tapestry woven by the divine hand. You got it. And Hermes actually uses the phrase, God is never absent, to emphasize this point.
God is never absent. It really makes you rethink the way you see the world.
It does. It invites us to see the interconnectedness of all things, the idea that we're all part of this grand tapestry woven by the divine hand.
So if we're all interconnected like that, does that change how we should live our lives? Does it come with a certain responsibility?
Hermes definitely believes so. He really stresses the importance of living in harmony with nature.
Harmony with nature.
Yeah. By observing the rhythms of nature, we can gain insights into the divine order that governs the universe.
So it's like nature is a mirror reflecting back to us the wisdom of the divine mind.
Exactly. And, the Hermetica is full of practical advice on how to live in alignment with this divine order.
Oh, really? Like what? Give me an example.
Well, one passage that really stood out to me was about the importance of finding stillness within ourselves. Hermes encourages us to cultivate inner peace through practices like meditation and contemplation.
Meditation and contemplation.
Yeah. He suggests that by calming the mind, we can become more receptive to the whispers of the divine.
It's like quieting all the noise so you can finally hear what your soul is trying to tell you.
Exactly. And it's so relevant to our lives today. We're constantly bombarded with information and stimulation. It's no wonder we feel so disconnected from ourselves, from each other, and from the natural world.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So how do we get back to that state of connection? How do we reconnect with our true nature?
Well, Hermes believed that it's all about cultivating a sense of wonder, of awe, of gratitude for the beauty and complexity of creation. And it's about recognizing that divine spark within ourselves and in every living thing.
It's like shifting your perspective.
Yeah,
Seeing the world through new eyes.
exactly. And it can be challenging to do that in our busy modern lives. But that's what makes these ancient teachings so valuable. They offer us a path back to wholeness, a way to reconnect with that divine spark that's always been within us.
So it's not about following strict rules or doctrines. It's more about cultivating a certain way of being in the world.
You hit the nail on the head. It's about cultivating a sense of wonder, of awe, of gratitude for the beauty and complexity of creation. And it's about recognizing the divine spark within ourselves and in every living thing.
It's like a journey of self-discovery, a path of spiritual growth.
Exactly. And, all of this leads to a profound realization that we touched on earlier.
Oh.
Remind me. The ultimate goal of this spiritual journey, according to Hermes, is to become a passive instrument of God's will.
Okay, now hold on. We talked about this before, and I'm still not quite sure I understand it. Doesn't passive kind of imply a lack of action or choice? How can we be passive and still live our lives to the fullest?
That's a common misunderstanding, and the book actually addresses it directly. Being a passive instrument doesn't mean becoming a mindless robot. It's
Yeah.
more about aligning ourselves with the divine flow of creation. Remember that craftsman analogy we talked about earlier?
Right, the artist letting their hand guide the brush.
Exactly. When we surrender our ego's desires and allow ourselves to be guided by a higher power, we become like that brush in the artist's hand. We're still active, we're still making choices, but those choices are in harmony with something larger than ourselves.
So it's about trusting that we're being led, even when we don't fully understand why things are happening the way they are.
That's a great way to put it. It's about having faith that there's a divine order to the universe, even when life feels chaotic or challenging. And it's about cultivating a deep sense of inner peace and knowing that we're always supported, even when we can't see the bigger picture.
That's beautiful. But how do we know if we're on the right path? How do we know if we're truly aligned with God's will?
That's where intuition and inner guidance come into play. Hermes really stresses the importance of listening to that still, small voice within. It's about developing a connection with our own inner wisdom, that part of us that is connected to the divine.
So it's less about following external rules and more about cultivating that inner connection with the divine.
You got it. And that connection is cultivated through practices like meditation, contemplation, spending time in nature, things that help to quiet the mind and open us up to higher wisdom.
This is all starting to make so much sense. Like Hermes is giving us a roadmap for spiritual growth.
That's a great way to think about it. But remember, this isn't just about accumulating knowledge. It's about embodying these principles in our daily lives. It's about how we treat ourselves, how we treat others, and how we interact with the world around us.
It's about bringing those ancient teachings into the present moment, making them relevant to our modern lives.
Exactly. And that brings us to the final part of our deep dive, where we'll explore the transformation of Hermes himself and what it means for our own spiritual journeys.
I can't wait. This deep dive is blowing my mind. I'm so
Yeah.
ready to see where we go next. Okay, so we're back. And I gotta say, this whole concept of becoming a passive instrument of God's will has really stuck with me. But I'm still kind of wrestling with how to actually do that. How to make it a reality.
Well, it's definitely a process. It's a journey. And remember, Hermes himself went through a profound transformation. He even said he stopped seeing the world with his physical eyes.
Right, and that's what I'm curious about. Did Hermes lay out a specific path for us to follow, to achieve that same kind of transformation?
Not exactly a step-by-step guide, but he did emphasize certain qualities that are essential for spiritual growth. In the book, he talks about things like purity of heart, a deep love for God, and a willingness to surrender your ego.
So it's not just about understanding the concepts intellectually, it's about really living them.
Exactly. It's about aligning your thoughts, your emotions, your actions, all with the divine will.
So it's kind of like surrendering, letting go of control, and trusting that something bigger than ourselves is guiding us.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And the book actually uses this analogy of a ship sailing on the ocean.
Okay, I like where this is going.
So the ship represents you. The ocean represents the divine will, and the wind represents the divine guidance that's pushing you forward.
Okay, I'm with you.
So when you resist the wind, you struggle, and you don't get very far. But when you set your sails to catch the wind, you move effortlessly towards your destination.
I love that. That's a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
But how do we know which way the wind is blowing? How do we tap into that divine guidance?
Well, Hermes suggests that the key is inner stillness.
Inner stillness.
Yeah, like quieting the mind through meditation, contemplation, spending time in nature, just being present in the moment.
So it's about silencing all that mental chatter so you can hear your intuition, that still small voice inside.
Exactly. And as you cultivate that connection with your inner wisdom, you start to notice the subtle cues and synchronicities that are guiding you along your path.
This is really making me think differently about my life. Instead of always pushing and striving, maybe it's more about surrendering to the flow, trusting that I'm being guided in the right direction.
It's a leap of faith, for sure, but the rewards are amazing. When you align yourself with the divine, will you tap into a source of wisdom and power that's far greater than your own limited understanding.
It's kind of scary, though,
Right?
letting go of control like that.
It can be. But think about it. When you surrender to the flow, you also surrender to a sense of peace and purpose that goes beyond all the ups and downs of everyday life.
That's so true. I never thought about it that way.
And remember, Hermes achieved this transformation thousands of years ago.
It's possible for us, too, today.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's the power of timeless wisdom. It transcends time and space. His message is as relevant today as it was in ancient Egypt.
Wow. This deep dive has been a real eye-opener for me. It's like I'm seeing the world in a whole new light.
I'm glad to hear that. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the lost wisdom of the pharaohs, I encourage you to think about what really resonated with you. What insights are you going to take with you?
I think the biggest takeaway for me is that we're not separate from the divine. We're expressions of it. And when we tap into that connection, we unlock a whole new level of peace and purpose in our lives.
Beautifully said. So as you go about your day, remember Hermes' teachings. Look for that divine spark in yourself and in others. Contemplate the wonders of creation and trust that you're a part of something much greater than yourself.
This has been an incredible journey, and I want to thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the wisdom of the ancients.
And until next time, may you continue to seek to learn and to grow on your own unique spiritual path.